We are live. This is Clean Hits Live. I don't know if we got our Twitter going, so I'm going to just pop that in real quick. The producer or the intern must not have clicked that button, so we'll have to have a talking to with him. But again, this is Clean Hits Live. I don't know if this is really going to be a not so clean hits version. It's still in the middle of the afternoon. I don't have a glass of white wine or a Coors Light crack, so I think you're going to still get some PG versions of this. But we were all chatting in the Clean Hits group chat, me, Corey, Trent, who are both here, and then Kenny, who unfortunately couldn't make it to this show. And we realized that we had a really interesting topic last offseason, and that was the blue line problem. And it's one of our first episodes on the Clean Hits Hockey podcast. Make sure you're subscribed. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all that fun stuff. But that problem got solved real quickly and probably better than any of us could have predicted. So if you want to see us take some really foolish predictions of what general manager Bill Armstrong was going to do to solve the blue line problem, because gosh, if you remember the Coyotes blue line the year before they moved to Utah has several players that just straight up aren't playing in the league anymore. Dumba, I don't think is playing for the Stars anymore. Now that Heiskanen's back, I think he's kind of been pushed down the depth chart. Stetcher, I do think got rolled back in, he's not an everyday defenseman for Edmonton.
Brown.
There's Patrick Brown.
Josh Brown.
Josh Brown, thank you. Yeah, see, I mean, that should say it all. And this has been a topic of discussion kind of throughout the entire season in the Clean Hits Discord and kind of around the Utah Mammoth. Gotta get used to saying that, of the center issue. And while it's not nearly as big of a problem as the blue line, I really feel like this is one of the most obvious places the team can improve in, whether that be center depth or just outright the 2C. And this offseason has a lot of decent options, actually. So we want to explore that on today's episode, which also just so happens to be episode 50 for us, which is pretty cool. I think we started actually doing podcasts after the draft last year. So 50 episodes, not including some of the post-game shows and stuff. Within less than a full year, it's not so bad. So pat yourselves on the back, Corey and Trent. But how are you guys doing?
Just counting down the days to draft day now, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, lots more excitement around it now. Picking 4 instead of 14. We'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, I feel like we were all kind of talking about off-season content. We're like, it'll be fun to talk about the draft and like some of those prospects that will be there around 14. But now it's kind of becoming all consuming. And we will talk a little bit about those center prospects that will potentially be there, or some of them will be there at pick 4. Trent, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm reeling a little bit. I had reached out to some people in the Discord about potentially doing some content around the mock draft at pick 14, thinking, that's great. We've got picks through picks 24 decided. We can kind of round robin it. We can vote on the Utah pick. It'll be fun. But now we get to Utah at like 4, and it's like, who the hell's really going to watch the rest of that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I really want to do it anymore. So we'll see. We'll have to reach out to those guys. Maybe we'll just do a debate on pick number 4 or something like this. But like go through the different scenarios or something. I got to put my thinking cap back on and brainstorm a different format, because I really don't want to sit and mock draft 20 additional picks after Utah's. Not something I really want to sign up for. But yeah, other than that, man, just a little bit exhausted thinking about the fact that Austin Facer, a one-man band, did 100 podcasts on his show recently. And I'm like, oh, geez, we can barely manage to get to 50, and there's 4 of us. Holy smokes.
Well, more coordination on our end, I guess. But no, the SLC Puck is an absolute machine. And I don't even know if we need to say to make sure you're following him, because I mean, he's on his way to becoming, I don't know, the secondary mascot of the team, it seems like. But
now there's an idea. Maybe when we do Clubber the Caveman mascot, it can just be Austin in a with a club and a cave, some sort of animal furs. Yeah, that's a really. He's got the beard. He's just got to stop getting his hair cut, and we're there. Yeah.
Yep. Or maybe like a Crown Burger wrapper wrap around him or something. So I don't know if he's really
either
out
that
there
or maybe
hunting
he'll
anything, but
crack you over the head with that club and take the Crown Burger right off your plate. He's
That's
too
true.
sweet of a guy for that. But maybe when he's in character, we know he likes to dress up.
That's true.
We saw many different costumes over
Yes.
those 100 episodes. So anyway,
Yes.
So this is this is basically like our reaction podcast to that podcast. We're basically a fan podcast at this point. So all right, I'm gonna quit talking now, and I'll turn the keys back over to you, Brad.
Yeah. So I feel like about halfway through the season, this was something that we started chatting about a bunch in the Discord. And again, if you're not in there and just can't get enough of Utah hockey, go to discord.cleanhitshockey.com. You can join. We have a trade thread, prospect thread, game day threads, tons of fun. We got about 200 fanatics in there. So come join the club over there. But I think by the end of the season, Barrett Hayton, who is really the second line center, sometimes top power play center, really proved that if worse came to worse, he could play that role. And granted, there's kind of different levels of centers throughout the league. You have your solid elite one centers. You kind of get those 1C/2C tweeners. I would say that's kind of like Matt Duchene, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Then there's the 2C/3C tweeners. I would say like Orion Hartman would be a more pronounced version of that. Chandler Stevenson, I feel like, is a good version of that. And then, of course, 3C, 4C tweeners. And then obviously you have the 1C, 2C, 3C, 4C. So guys who kind of can play both roles. Maybe you don't want them on the upper echelon of their ability, but you don't hate it if that's what you're stuck with, right? And I feel like Hayton is more of that. You can survive if he's your 2C. You probably would love it if he was your 3C, though. And
yeah, I think that was just one of the biggest takeaways from this season. I think Barrett Hayton had a good season, but I think he showed that he's not a number one center, and that's not really a knock on him. I know he was drafted high, but there's nothing wrong with being a solid second or third line center. Ideally, if he's a third line center, he might be the best third line center in the league.
I think also you can put Jack McBain in that category a little bit. He moved over to center, and his line with Krause and Doan was one of the best down the stretch. And once again, if Jack McBain can be your 4C, holy smokes, that's a heck of a good fourth line center. I mean, we have Kevin Stenlund in that role now, and he's amazing. And that's definitely something that Jack McBain could grow into being. So if you have Barrett Hayton as your 3C and Jack McBain as your 4C, you're set up really, really well down the middle as far as depth is concerned. And you have a little bit of optionality moving McBain to the wing if, say, Cole Baudouin takes a big step in his development and is ready to step in at some point in the future here too.
Yeah, agreed. And some of the issues here is I feel like this team, one, it took a step back in goals for per game. 2 seasons ago, when the team was much worse and not fighting for a playoff spot come March, they were tied with LA for 15th. This season, they dropped to the 21st team for goals for per game played. Even though it felt like Keller had a career year. We had Cooley and Gunther take huge steps. Schmaltz had a career year as well, even if it wasn't on a point per game level. And it's kind of odd when you think about that. And granted, we had guys like Harkoni putting up 20 goals, and there's probably a little bit of that garbage time aspect where teams are taking the foot off the pedal and allowing some slop go in, and that probably came to the benefit there. But I'm thinking about playoffs now. It's solidly in my mind. And that top six, especially that second line, needs an upgrade. And again, I think center is the one area. Obviously, maybe we upgrade a wing there too, but we have some really tremendous prospects at wing coming up. coming down the road. Maybe we need a little bit of a bridge at center. And that's kind of why we got together and are doing almost like a little emergency podcast here live. So I think if you saw the thumbnail for this episode, we highlighted Sam Bennett, Matt Duchene, and Marco Rossi, and they're almost all in different situations. And I think when you're trying to think of a player that's a fit, there's got to be this Venn diagram. So one circle, availability. So clearly Colorado's not trading Nathan McKinnon, right? So just cut out these players that aren't available. A fringe big name that may or may not be would maybe be Tage. I think it's a little outlandish. Robert Thomas was one that could kind of get thrown around, but I think he is probably on an absolutely cannot be moved list anymore.
Sure.
So that's kind of factor one. So can we either trade for them? Will they be available in free agency? That second circle would be kind of age and production. So do they actually fit that 2C mold? Or are they maybe more of a 3C? Like, will they actually improve this team on a goals for per game standpoint, help the offensive output of that second line, and still kind of fit that GMBA style play with a little bit of grit? And then that third circle, I would say, would be acquisition cost. Can you stomach it? Whether that be the contract you have to give up in free agency, whether that be the pieces you have to give away for a trade. And then in the middle there, that's what we are zoning in on here. And those were kind of the first three names we thought of. Some of those have been discussed for a while now between Mammoth fans here. And let's kind of talk about them. So two of these players are still in the playoffs. One was in the first round. And let's start with Sam Bennett, because this seems like the most obvious one. He's got the snarl. He's got the two-way play. He's a UFA on a cap strap team, so the availability aspect is perfect. I think the age and the fit is maybe a little bit in the middle. And then acquisition cost, I think, is probably a big question, because as a free agent, somebody will do something dumb, like a Seattle Chandler Stevenson type contract. And as we try to manage this cap space, I don't know if that's how Utah should spend some of that extra cap they have, even though they have oodles of it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't think there's an acquisition cost because he's going to be a free agent. But yeah, it is concerning what that contract's going to look like, right? How old is he? He's already in his 30s, right? He's never hit.
Nope,
50
he
points.
will be 29 years old when free agency opens on July 1st.
Okay.
He turns 29 in late June, so a week before the draft. He'll turn 29.
But he's going to get the full 7. So by the end of that deal, he's going to be 36. And I don't think there's a number. Like, if you think, okay, what if we just give him more money and bring down the term? So, but I don't think you're going to be able to do that, because I think even over 7 years, teams are going to be offering like 8. So you got to push that to like 10 to get that to a 5-year term. And even 5 years is a little long for his style of play. And like, I don't want to give him $10 million.
That's fair. And
like, he's not even an option in my mind.
You mentioned his style of play, and I think that's really important to note here. He's not that big, but he plays like an absolute axe murderer out there. Yeah. He's a blood and guts player. His hair is on fire. He goes 100% all out, throws cheap shots, gets into fights.
Maybe
that's
fire.
Right. Not on his head. That's right. Well, yeah, it all singed off, right? His motor revved too high. His hair went ablaze. Maybe when he was a Calgary Flame, and by the time he got to Florida, he had to double up on the SPF on the old cranium there. When it wasn't getting punched in by somebody because he did something gnarly after the whistle, right? So that's Sam Bennett, man. He grew up wearing Doug Gilmour's number, the little ball of hate. He did that for a reason, right? He is definitely one of those players who gives it his all. And you see those warrior type of players age very rapidly. You know, like in the NFL, your running backs have an expiration date pretty quick. In the NHL, these fan favorites tend to fall off a cliff all at once. Mike Richards did it. Wayne Simmons, to a certain extent, had to change his game because of his effectiveness fell off a cliff. We've seen with Lindgren in New York, who just got traded. Lindgren's game has really fallen off as well. So these guys tend not to age very well. So I feel like with Sam Bennett, you can expect him to probably be this kind of player for another 3 or 4 years at max. And beyond that is when you get into the zone of how much you're going to have to pay another team to take them off your hands, or what the buyout's going to look like. And for teams who are right in the middle of their cup window, they're not really thinking about down the road. They don't really care if his contract ages poorly, because if they think their window is open for another 3 to 4 years at best, they'll bring in the best player they can get. And they'll just buy him out later, right?
Exactly.
And that, unfortunately, given the age of Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley, is not the position Utah is in right now, to have a contract that ends up a bit of a boat anchor at just the wrong time, right? When they're looking to add a prime Sam Bennett for a cup run, they're not going to be able to do it, because they're going to have a not prime Sam Bennett on the books.
I think one other side benefit of Bennett, if we go that direction, is I wonder if you bring him in, can he, bring out that snarl in his former junior teammate in Lawson Krause? I call him the friendly giant. He's the 6'4", 220, should be power forward, and he's not. But I wonder if you reunite those two, the success they had together in the OHL in Kingston, if you put them together again, can we finally see the style of player that Lawson Krause should be? And if Krause does play like that, I mean, not only is it more physical, but everything else is going to come with it, more success offensively and everything else.
I've got a little bit of a mea culpa I've got to get out. I just referred to Doug Gilmour as the little ball of hate. That, of course, is Pat Verbeek.
Yes.
Doug Gilmour is Doug Killer Gilmour. Killer Gilmour. Yes. I apologize. Holy smokes. I mean, I make a big show of being anti-Canadian here, but I'm sure our friends up north were just screeching and punching their whatever device they're watching the scream on, hearing me refer to Doug Gilmour by Pat Verbeek's nickname. So my apologies there to all of our impassioned Canadian fans north of the border. And by that, I mean you, Rod Anderson. You're the only one I see in the chat right now. So sorry about that, boys.
Going to bring this up from Clever So We Die. Does Hayton accept that role at 3C? So kind of going back a little bit from what we're talking about. And one thing that's actually a little bit interesting to me about Sam Bennett is I could see a world where they kind of bounce back and forth in those roles. So maybe when the team just needs a little bit more of an offensive output, gosh, maybe Hayton is actually what can bring a little bit extra, because don't forget, Sam Bennett is a player who just had his best season with 51 points. Now, there's some years where his point per game is a little bit higher, but before that, it was his first full year in Florida where he had 28 goals and 49 points total. Hayton just coming off his career year of 20 goals, 45 points. So when we were talking about raising that goals for per game, Bennett may actually not be that guy, especially as he starts to age out too a little bit. So I'm going to kind of toss that in the cons area. I think the snarl, two-way play, all that has to be in the pros. I don't think there's anybody who would be, having to go to the bar and ringing up a big tab if we ended up spending a lot of money on Bennett this offseason. I think there has to be an exit strategy with him. Any final thoughts on Bennett before we start moving on to another option too?
I think if you got to plan an escape route before the ink on the contract is even dry, don't sign it.
Yep, and I think that's a good point to think about when you're doing the Venn diagram exercise.
Unless your window's shutting, right? And
there's two different. You better win the cup in that contract.
Well, there's two different windows, right? There's a window for the team's ability to compete, and then there's a window for how much rope a GM has. So if the Utah Mammoth were a little bit closer to cup contention, it might make some sense, especially if their best players were a bit older. Or if their general manager had some pressure to either make the playoffs or get canned. This is the kind of thing a desperate GM might think about doing. And I don't think Bill Armstrong is in that position. And even if he were, I don't think signing Sam Bennett or not signing Sam Bennett to what would probably be a dumb contract is going to be the difference between him keeping his job or not. I think there are other safer, less catastrophic ways to make moves to improve the team enough to qualify for the playoffs and preserve his job if he even is feeling any of that pressure, which he oughtn't be, even if he is.
Yeah, and I think beyond that, there's teams that are going to offer Bennett the same as that we could do and who are closer to a cup. So in his mind, why come to Utah right now? I mean, there might be a cup chance in 3 or 4 years, but if some other team offers the same amount of money and has, a closer cup window, then he's going to go there.
I'm going to quickly pull up Flo, our friend from Down Under's comment too, of another guy that I don't think we were talking too much about, but Brock Nelson as a free agent. I think he brings a lot of scoring touch, obviously, and a lot of those qualities, that two-way quality of the Sam Bennett. You probably could get him for a shorter contract as well. For some reason, I don't know why. It just doesn't seem like there's much of a connection with him. But
I think he's going to go to Minnesota.
Know. Yeah. It just feels like staying in Colorado or Minnesota or another team that...
And he wasn't really good in Colorado. Now, I don't know if they feel like they're inclined to sign him because they gave up a lot, but I mean, at what point is that just like a gambler's fallacy where you've kind of dug in and like, do you got to keep him just because you gave up a pretty good return? But I don't know.
Yeah. But interesting name to keep your eyes out, especially as we get closer to UFA. It will be where Nelson decides to go.
He had like one long playoff run, I think, with the Islanders several years ago. And, he's probably going to be looking to chase that again. He was traded to Colorado, and I'm sure he fully expected a nice long run this playoffs and didn't get it. And that was after not a whole lot of playoff success with the Islanders, apart from, their, pre-pandemic playoff runs that he was a part of. So it's been a while for him. So he doesn't have a whole lot of time left. I imagine he's probably looking to sign with a team that actually qualified for the playoffs this year would be my guess.
I would have to agree. One other comment that I want to bring up too, Dylan Larkin as a 2C would be something, even as a kind of bridge 1C until Cooley really grabs that by the reins. The problem is when you're thinking of that Venn diagram, the acquisition costs on this would be extremely high. And he is a year older draft class wise. I'm sorry, 2 than Clayton Keller. So as far as that fit goes, you'd probably have him long term, and he's not old yet, but
plus I don't think there's really a fit for Detroit. Like they don't want
Detroit wouldn't.
They would have to
that'd
be accepting a second rebuild.
Yeah, that'd be like us trading Keller. They're kind of in the same position as us. They really need to make the playoffs. He's probably the most important piece they've got in so doing. So I really don't think they're going to trade Dylan Larkin. I don't see anything they'd be interested in there for that, especially given, a lot of their strength is along the blue line there. So,
they got to make the playoffs or they have to very awkwardly fire Steve Yzerman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at that point
be promoted upstairs.
Available and whatnot.
He'd probably be the chief executive officer of brand or something. Yeah.
All right. Well, Chase in the comment section hit one of the guys we want to discuss, and this is going to be a totally different situation for that acquisition cost that we brought up. So we've already kind of talked about free agency here. And even Larkin has been more of a sending players or picks in a trade situation. But Marco Rossi, the young 2020 NHL draft class center for the Minnesota Wild, would be fitting into that offer sheet, which we saw it's kind of a rare thing to happen in the league, but we saw 2 happen last summer to the same team where St. Louis Blues offer sheeted both Broberg and Holloway from the Edmonton Oilers, both former first round picks, and got not one, but both of them. And they've made huge impacts on that team, especially for their depth scoring and depth play. Could Marco Rossi be one of those targets for an offer sheet? Well, Seemingly, yes, because everything that keeps on coming out about the Wild is that they may not be all that interested in giving him the contract he's looking for. Corey, I know you know quite a bit about this, and you've been banging that Rossi drum, ringing the Rossi cowbell as much as you possibly can. It's like it's the only cure to your fever, if you will. Tell us a little bit more about that offer sheet, what that exactly means, and why he's so intriguing to you.
Yeah, he's still top of my list. Now, I do say there is a bit of a caveat because now that we're picking 4, it doesn't really make much sense to me to have Rossi and then drop a young center. I mean, I guess you could go, Cooley, Rossi, some young center, and Hayton down the middle. But then, where does that leave Stenlund and McBain and Baudouin? So I think that's part of the decision. And I'm thinking even an offer sheet. Everything coming out of Minnesota is they want clarity on what they're looking at cap-wise going into July 1st. Now, they do have that Suter and Parise money coming off the books, but there's a lot of speculation that Kirill Kaprizov is going to be the highest paid player in the NHL next season, and that could be, $15 million. So, there goes all the Suter and Parise money plus right there. Now, I don't fully understand why they want to get rid of Marco Rossi. I know he got dumped down to the 4th line in the playoffs. He still had some offensive success. They seem to be criticizing his height, not his size, but I mean, he was 5'9" when they drafted him when he was 17 or 18. I mean, I guess he could still grow, but how much are you really expecting him to grow at that age when he's only 5'9"? Maybe 2 inches, but probably 1, if that. And going back to the offer sheet, with Minnesota wanting clarity before July 1st, it seems like a Rossi trade could happen before a offer sheet is even a possibility. So I wonder if you go up to Bill Guerin and say, July 1st, we're going to offer sheet this guy. So let's do a trade now. And maybe it's just the same picks. Maybe it's a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, or maybe it's equivalent value. And just one other thing on Rossi, I was watching his exit interview that the Wild posted on their site, and he spoke about his exit interview he had with the Wild coach, John Hines, mentioned that Rossi was disappointed with his usage in the playoffs. A little unusual to hear a player admit that publicly, but he also admitted, and I don't know if this was just the case with Rossi or all the Wild players, but he did not have an exit interview with Bill Guerin. And that seemed a little bit strange to me, to let one of your most important players, one of your most important trade chips, go into the offseason without any sort of discussion with him, which leads me to believe that if he's not coming to Utah, he is getting traded somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that with Rossi, it's kind of funny. A lot of times when you talk to fans of other teams and you ask about the availability of a player or whether they might be a good fit for your team or what it might take in a trade to get them, and oftentimes they say, "Oh, you'd have to overpay to get him because he means more to us than he would mean to any other team. We're not going to get fair value for him because to us he's more important than he would be to any other acquiring team." Sort of like Josh Doan would be for Utah. You're not going to get fair value for Josh Doan, right? He makes a lot more sense for us. He's more important for us and our future and our fit and what we're trying to do here than he would be in terms of market value. It almost seems like Marco Rossi's the opposite. For some unknown reason, they seem to undervalue their own asset in a way that with a player of a different background and character reputation might throw up some red flags for me. You know what I mean? I might be thinking like, what do they know about this player that we don't know, that we can't see on the ice? But he's got an absolutely really, really good reputation, right? He's got a spotless reputation as a hard worker and a character player. The production seems there finally. I just wonder maybe if they don't like the fit of him in their group.
That seems to be the case.
And maybe they just want to make room for a piece like Brock Nelson, like we talked about, who is bigger and is from Minnesota and maybe fits the depth of their group and what they're trying to do a little bit better. And Rossi's new contract would stand in the way there. And I guess I would say also Bill Guerin gets a lot of love in the national media because he's pretty chummy and he says funny stuff on the draft stage. But I don't know, man. I've really never been impressed by that dude ever personally.
Well, some of the shine for sure.
He may just not be that good of a GM or evaluator. And I don't know. We'll see.
And another thing, as far as Minnesota's cap space, also a lot of rumors connecting them not only to one Minnesota native in Brock Nelson, but also with Brock Besser as well. And that could be $8, $9, $10 million. So when Marco Rossi has already turned down $5 million, Are you really going to go $7 million for him if you're trying to fit in all these other guys?
I'd rather have
And-
Rossi than either of those players. I don't know about you
Same.
guys.
I'd rather have
And I
Rossi than
do-
both of those players.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, especially for the age fit, but maybe that competing now and trying to get that taking advantage of that window, which is so weird because the Wild have so many good young prospects and players that have hit the team already too. But I
wouldn't be
think
surprised if they trade a lot of those guys.
And if you don't know a lot about Marco Rossi, by the way, there was an article by Michael Russo, the Wild beat reporter, speaking with Andre Tourné, who coached Rossi in junior, and Tourné compared him to Ryan O'Reilly, which was the MVP of Bill Armstrong's St. Louis Blues Stanley Cup winning team.
Also, friend of the show, Brogan Houston, I believe, connected Rossi and did a little digging into how he might be a good fit for the team based on the fact that he played for head coach Andre Tourné. And, you know, I love the irony of a little 5'9" bowling ball signing with the newly coined Utah Mammoth. I don't know. I'm just weird that way.
I just to try to make sense of it, because the Wild have felt like a centerless team for so long, and making do with Ryan Hartman playing with Zuccarello and Kaprizov on the top line, and Eriksson Ek playing with Boldy and whoever else they were throwing at them, the retired corpse of Marcus Johansson on the second line. This year things changed, and with Kaprizov out, we saw guys like Foligno and Gaudreau really take a big step up. And granted, those guys probably aren't going to be keeping up that type of production year over year, but I think I was most impressed with the growth of Eriksson Ek, Jeek, as we call him in the capping community, who really kind of took a step forward and being a better offensive contributor, and for the first time really started to have chemistry with Kaprizov. So maybe they do see a world where Eriksson Ek is on that top line with Kaprizov, and they get somebody like Nelson on the second line, replace somebody like Johansson with Bosser, and it really fill out the lineup that way. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think my biggest con with Rossi is what that offer sheet means as far as what picks go away, especially in what is supposed to be a very, very deep and stacked draft next year.
Is that maybe more motivation to do a deal before July 1st, even if you can offer the same picks and you put a conditional on that first, basically a McKenna protection?
The other reason for doing something like that too is Minnesota may want some more players that can play now. Maybe they don't want just the picks. I mean, Schmaltz, adding a little skill like Schmaltz on that team makes a lot of sense. Maybe they want somebody like Michelli, just a cheaper contract that can fill out that roster a little bit.
And he's not nothing, right? He had 57 points in Arizona last year, so good bounce back candidate. I don't know if he's going to get to 57, but if you can get 40 points out of him,
no, I mean, that's pretty interesting. And great question by Marty Phelps here. Marco Rossi compared to Theo Fleury, Utah legend.
He doesn't have that same fire. Yeah, he's Marco Rossi's a high energy, shorter player with a thick build. But Theo Fleury is a one of a kind. He's not just a Utah legend; he's a hockey legend. I mean, he's a special player. We have not seen too many guys like that come through the league. So I don't think Rossi's quite there, but he's still his own player, and one that I think at least would be a pretty good fit here in Utah.
Yeah, and he could say all the right things and maybe pump up Fleury as his favorite player or whatnot if he were to come by and do some entrance interviews and really get the fan base on his side. But yeah, so that's kind of the idea of Rossi here, is using either that offer sheet option where you're strictly trading picks, getting that player and kind of forcing the hand of the team to have to move them, or maybe try to do a little godfathering here and make them an offer they can't refuse before that offer sheet period kicks in. That makes a lot of sense for both sides. Again, very strange that the Wild may have given up on him, but I didn't see anything in his play this year that necessarily would detract me from him. I think my biggest concern here is the size. We would have Cooley and him down the middle for a long time. Kind of makes pick 4 interesting now that we won the draft lotto. If Martone isn't there, who is kind of the big skillsy winger option, and then we're probably going to draft a centerman if he were to already be selected by Chicago and with the 3rd overall pick. Kind of starts to crowd that center position down the road, and Rossi wouldn't necessarily be that bridge guy, kind of like some of these UFAs we're going to talk about too. So,
well, you
definitely,
know, my one thought,
some pros and cons. That Venn diagram's a little hard to read too, but that's kind of how this goes. What were you going to say, Trent?
Yeah, just another point on Rossi. It was a couple years ago that we acquired a player that I thought we got really cheap and didn't understand why his team parted with him. That was Sean Durzi. A little small for a defenseman, maybe viewed as a little bit one-dimensional at that time. He's a foundational core player for this team for the future, and we paid a 2nd-round pick for him just because LA had kind of a dope for a GM who couldn't evaluate his own talent and kept trading the wrong players for bad returns, and we took advantage of that. So could Marco Rossi be this year's Sean Durzi? I think there's a very good chance that he could, that you could get him for a lot less than you expected. And you're laughing all the way to the bank, just like you did with Sean Durzi. And then in addition to that, just like Durzi is a cheap acquisition for right-handed defensemen, alleviated a lot of pressure to have to shore up that position with a big acquisition. It let us focus our attention on a left shot D who's generally a little bit cheaper and easier to acquire, like Mikhail Sergachev. And I feel like if we were to add somebody like Rossi, to your point, Brad, not just at the draft table, but on the trade market and in free agency, we could then focus our attention on wingers a little bit more to get more scoring depth. And those guys tend to come a little bit cheaper and a little bit easier and a little bit more available. So that's one added benefit of Rossi. Think of a Rossi acquisition as a way to not have to overspend elsewhere and to set yourself up for a few more bargains around him.
And if you're going to overspend, to give it to a 24-year-old rather than a 29-year-old.
Makes a lot of sense. I can see why Corey's so obsessed with it. Yeah. And then finally, if we do acquire Marco Rossi, Corey can show the world his Marco Rossi tattoo finally. So
I was just going to say, if it happens, my first Mammoth jersey will have Rossi. That's my promise if this trade happens.
The other thing with the idea of Rossi too is it would shut down the potential to offer sheet anyone else, obviously. And there's been this name thrown around quite a bit. This is from Yuli Cal. I'm sorry if I totally mispronounced that, but throwing big time money at Matty Nyes, I think, is one thing we've all chatted about, especially in the Discord. Because man, is he having a playoff to remember and looking like one of the premier power forwards of this entire league now. Mm-hmm. Exactly what GMBA I would be salivating for, and it is such a shame that we did not draft him in the 2nd round in 2021 because we had some picks that we could have landed him with. But I don't know. That was going to be a tough one to pull out Toronto. It does seem with the way he's performing that they would probably rather let Marner go than let anybody take Nyes away from them. But definitely an interesting one, and it would put them in a bad spot if you load up on what that contract looks like. And then this one just gave me some heartburn. I'm sorry, Jason. We are not doing PS Suitor. PS5. Not happening, man. I don't know what I would do if that was our big get this summer. Fantastic little 3C there, but so
yeah, PS Suitor would be what the Coyotes would have done. That would have been the Coyotes' big splash.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. I think in Utah the Mammoth are big game hunting. They're not looking for carrion laying in the desert like the half starving Coyotes were looking for roadkill. No, the Mammoth, they're big game hunters. Corey, you're in Toronto, taking it back to Nyes, who's not a center and probably not someone we should focus too much time on. But I have a question. You've got your finger on the pulse there in Toronto as a Leafs hater embedded in their enemy territory. Say that you could keep Marner at 13, hometown discount, which I don't think he's going to offer, but say you could keep him at 13 for 7 years, and then say Matty Nyes really wanted to hold you over a barrel and wanted more money than anyone would have expected. Say Matty Nyes wanted 7 years, 11 million, right? Probably more than anyone expects him to ask for. So they're looking at the same contract, 7 years, 13 for Marner, 7 years, 11 for Nyes. I'm not asking you what's the smart play here, but what would your impulse be on the Leafs media and Leafs fandom? What would be the percentage split for keeping Marner on a little bit of a discount or a little bit of an overpay for Nyes? Which guy do you think they'd choose?
Leaf fans or the Leafs?
Leaf fans.
I think 11 is a lot for Matthew Nyes, but I think at the same time, Mitch Marner has not necessarily worn out his welcome. But if Toronto exits early again in these playoffs, once again, when they've had Stanley Cup aspirations and the Cup drought reaches 58 years, I think it's maybe a tough sell to bring him back at age 29 for 7 or 8 years times 14 million. At least with Matthew Nyes, there's hope. This is something relatively new. He's a bit of a unicorn in this league. Now, he's not a throwback Wendell Clark or anything like that for Toronto, but this is a player they haven't had in a long time. There's only a handful of them in the league, if that. So yeah, that's a tough one. I thought you were going to say keep those two and walk from Tavares, but that's a little complicated too, because talk of needing a 2 center. They have Austin Matthews, but if Tavares leaves, they need a 2C, because then you get into like Max Domi and who's the other one? Scott Laughton, and those aren't second line centers. So This is really tricky. And they only have about $24 million. There's those 3 guys needing new contracts, and then you need about another 3 or 4 more forwards, even at league minimum. And this is pretty tight. So someone's going to have to go. They can't keep all the big 3 unless somehow they convince Nyes to take a bridge deal. But I don't think Marner's taken any less than 13, 12 and a half to stay in Toronto. Tavares, maybe a hometown discount, but I don't know. I think he's going to want at least 7 still. When was the last time a player genuinely took a huge discount? Maybe Solani in Korea when they did that package deal in Colorado 20 years ago. No one's taken, because they don't want to do it because it screws over the PA, right? And then if Tavares takes $3 million, you think Matt Duchene is going to be happy in free agency?
They did that to go to a dynasty. Something Toronto is very much not. Yes.
Right.
So given the very difficult circumstances I gave you, and it was still a tough call that you couldn't really make a choice on, the fact that Nyes will probably be asking for less than that, and Marner will probably be asking for more than that, makes me think it'll end up being less of a difficult decision than people think. I think Nyes is staying, and I think Marner's going.
Yeah, I think Marner's going. They already tried to trade him to Carolina, and I do think there's a number of teams that can give him the money he wants. Not only Utah, but I think Anaheim is a contender. I think Columbus is a contender. I think Carolina, Pittsburgh with the Kyle Dubas connection. I think there's a lot of teams. Chicago put him with Bedard, give Bedard some kind of hope.
Yeah. I think Marner would eat that up too. I think he'd love to be in Chicago. I think he'd be, and
maybe he'd like to get out of the Toronto circus too.
Yeah.
Right.
I think they'd love him in Chicago.
Yeah. It's not easy living in the Toronto bubble and losing year after year. I'm sure players, less media pressure in Chicago, but imagine going from Toronto to Anaheim.
Yeah.
Better beaches there too. But this isn't the Leafs hit, so let's get this back on track, guys. I absolutely love it when I get a layup, and Spencer in the comment section just dropped, what about 3-year overpay for Tavares or Duchene? And that's exactly who we are going to bring up next. But I do have to do a little self-promotion, or I'd be kicking myself. If you're enjoying the Clean Hits podcast, make sure you're subscribing to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Find us on Instagram. Join us at the Discord, or maybe pick up one of our sweet shirts we have. We have some of these Mammoth Club t-shirts, the Elite Sergachev shirt, Mr. Versatility himself, Clayton Keller, we made a beautiful shirt for, or, pick up your Dylan Gunther Costco Club Co shirt so you can be just like the man himself who dons it daily from what we heard. And you can get any of our merch at shop.cleanhits.com. Even that Cult of GMBA shirt, which you may see floating around Awesome Facer's studio now. And this is actually what I've been told from the old tomes here, that the more people wearing that Cult of GMBA shirt during free agency and the draft, the better he does. So make sure you get that to help the team that's kind of doing your part as part of Club Mammoth. But yeah, thank you everybody for all the support over the past year. The first 50 episodes of the show officially, and we do have those super memberships on the YouTube. You can get some stickers and stuff like that if you want to go down that route as well. So, all right, last but not least option here, and that is kind of that idea of an overpay for an older vet here. Sam Bennett's kind of in that in-between area, but plays a very different game that may not hold up well. Marco Rossi's on the younger side, but smaller end. Would have to give up quite a bit of picks if we went the offer sheet route to pull him out of the Minnesota Wild. What about somebody like Matt Duchene or John Tavares? And let's start with Matt Duchene, who I think's availability, if we go back to the Venn diagram exercise, is probably much more large than Tavares's, who I think Tavares has had a fantastic playoff so far. And as we mentioned when we were kind of doing our Leafs chat, going to put them in a bad situation if he doesn't resign, because they don't really have a true 2C to keep kind of funneling that top six, the offensive power that they have there. Whereas Duchene has not had a great playoff by any stretch of the imagination and is an upcoming UFA on yet another cap strap team who is contending and has some humongous contracts that they have to pay. I think Duchene is really interesting for this team. And we haven't really talked about it much this season till very, very recently. Because I don't think any of us really realized he was a UFA. I thought he had another year, to be honest. He was, I think he was top 10 in scoring for all centers in the league. Was absolutely carrying the team when Jason Robertson's offense kind of fizzled out kind of early into the season. And now, again, hasn't looked great during the playoffs, but right now the Utah Mammoth are just trying to make it. And you add a guy who could easily bring 70 points, maybe help some of those wingers on the second line flourish a little bit, maybe improve some of the power play production. And man, I think he's kind of a really nice fit here.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm surprised he was a unrestricted free agent. I thought he had another year left. I think he's a perfect short term if we go a center in the draft, right? I mean, even if we don't go a center, it gives you at least a couple more years to add some kind of young center. I'm curious what he's going to want contract wise, because he did get the big buyout from Nashville. And then he took a smaller deal with Dallas because he just got the huge buyout. But then he took another kind of small deal with Dallas, right? 1 year, $3 million. So I wonder if maybe part of me wonders if he's just going to stay in Nashville because he's moved around quite a bit from, the last 7 or 8 years from Colorado to Ottawa to Nashville to Dallas. I mean, maybe he just wants to stay in one spot for a little bit. But this is probably his last opportunity to cash out. He's 34 years old, so this is the last big contract most likely, especially with that 35-year-old rule kicking in. So I do wonder if there's a possibility there, and I'm not sure how much it would play into it, but he also has some experience with Andre Tourné because Tourné was an assistant coach in Colorado when Duchene was there.
Yeah, which was a connection I completely forgot about until you brought it up recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Duchene, it seems like it was a short stop in Nashville, but he was actually there for 4 full seasons.
Yeah.
In Dallas, it's only been 2. So, he's not quite the suitcase it seems. I think that little stopover in Columbus kind of messes with our perception there a little bit.
Oh, jeez.
But he's a guy who early on in his career, we couldn't figure out if he was a center or if he was a wing. He wasn't very good defensively at all. He wasn't a very reliable center. He's gotten a little bit more well-rounded in recent years, in my opinion. He's become a lot more reliable in the face-off circle in recent years versus his early career, and maybe somebody who would be a great baton passer to whoever it is that we draft 4th overall if it's a centerman. Someone who can sort of come down the depth chart as our younger centers like Hayton and potentially Baudouin, or if we draft a center at 4, could come up the depth chart. I think Duchene would be a really, really good fit as far as that's concerned, because he's 38, but he's been playing at a really high level, and his game, unlike Bennett, is not dependent on brute force and physicality. He's still a very mobile player. He's always been seen as a cerebral player, and these are guys who tend to age a little bit better. He doesn't often end up just getting killed out there, right? So he hasn't had, I don't think, a recent history, at least, of major injuries. His last 4 seasons, 82 games played, 80 games played, 71, 78. And then you get into pandemic stuff, so who knows? So, he seems to be taking good care of himself. And he could be a really good fit for the team. If he's looking to get paid because he's taken too many discounts, we've got a lot of available cap space, and we may have more ability to overpay this dude on a 3 or 4 year deal than any other team who's got our same odds of making the playoffs and doing some damage when we get there. Most of the teams that would be able to overpay him are going to be like Chicago or something like this, who don't have a prayer. So we've got a unique opportunity for him if he wants it.
And he played in Colorado, right? So if you can go to Utah, which is right next door, with a lot of similarities, could be appealing as well.
Agreed. And that what you were just saying, Trent, goes right into what a comment from Grizz is saying. Duchene said he wants to win. So Grizz is saying he can't see him leaving Dallas, but Dallas has Jamie Benn, Granlund, who probably will just go to UFA, Duchene, Dadonov to sign. Then they got Wyatt Johnston's $8.4 million kicking in, and Jake Ottinger bumping up from his $4 million cap hit right now to 8.25, plus Cody Ceci being a UFA, Nils Lundqvist being an RFA, Maverick Borok being an RFA. So they got some situations to kind of work with. And then on top of that, Jason Robertson only has 1 more year till he goes RFA. So it may be a little bit of moving chairs. You had a follow-up comment about going to Tampa. Kind of goes into that cap-strapped component here. He may actually have to take a discount to go to a place like Tampa, but that is a pretty interesting opportunity there too. But
I would say he'd probably have to take a discount in both. They'd probably want a shorter term deal than Utah could offer at a much lower rate. He's already kind of done that. And let's not count out the opportunity for both Duchene and Tavares, frankly. If they're desperate to win a cup and you wonder, can Utah provide that before they're over the hill? They might win it this year. Either one of them could win it this year. They're still very much in the fight. They've got a 1-in-8 shot of winning it right now. So if Dallas does win that cup, they're probably going to want to keep their window open longer. And Matt Duchene will have his ring, and he'll probably be sick and tired of taking discount contracts at that point. So, frankly, his discount contracts don't really make a whole lot of sense anyways. He seems to be a guy who should have been paid. Maybe there's a bit of a market correction on that for him.
One other free agent who we haven't talked about, I know we've talked about Tavares, we've talked about Duchene, and this is probably more of a Hail Mary if we strike out on those two, if we strike out on Marco Rossi and the other names available. I don't think he's coming to Utah, but I wonder if we should at least consider it. Would you sign Jonathan Toews?
Oh, man. No.
He's 37. He hasn't played in 2 years. He's played more recently than Landeskog outside of the playoffs, but I don't think I would want to do it. But I mean, if it's like down to like, do you bring back Nick Bjugstad or Jonathan Toews? I don't know, but
well, I might
get
back and
Suter
get
at
50
that
points.
point. Let's go out and get PS Suter at that point.
Let me say it like this. I would not let Jonathan Toews' availability or even interest in coming to Utah, say he's fully on board and wants to come, and the feeling is mutual and we'd love to have him. Even if that's true, I wouldn't let that affect my center strategy, because you can't rely on him to be a solution to this problem, right? The name of the episode is the 2C problem. He's not reliably a fit to be a solution to that problem. So you'd need to address it anyway. But would I be willing to trade for Rossi and sign Taves? Probably, sure. I mean, if Bill Armstrong and the professional scouts and the whole front office believe in him and believe in his ability to come back and make an impact, I might be willing to roll the dice on that and give him Matias Michelli's roster spot, trade Michelli for a 3rd round pick or whatever, and sign Jonathan Taves to a cheap 1-year deal, a show me deal. Sure. But I'm also going to need to address the 2C problem, irrespective of Taves being interested in coming to Utah.
Yeah, he is more like a plan GH. If we strike out on absolutely everything. Yes, plan T. Let's go with that.
All right. Well, hey, real quick, I'm going to ask both of you. If you had to pick right now out of
Rossi.
Okay. You can pick Rossi, Bennett, Duchene, and then you can throw in the 2 kind of other outliers there of Tavares and Brock Nelson as your options here. Which one would you grab?
I think I'd prefer to pursue a trade option with Rossi. I think he's available. I think the acquisition cost will be reasonable, and I think the cost to re-sign him would be reasonable. So Rossi would be my first pick of the available options. I think if we were going to go the free agent route, probably only one or the other of Tavares would be available, of Tavares and Duchene. So I'd happily sign either one as a plan B. I don't think both will probably hit the market and both be interested in coming to Utah. So I'm not sure how I would decide on which one I prefer, but I don't think I'd have to. So I'd love to take a stab at luring either one here. I think Nelson's going to want a little more term, a little bit more cash, a little bit more security to be a little bit more of a belle of the ball. I think he's got a probably different idea of himself given the market for him at the trade deadline than either Duchene or Tavares would, who would probably have more realistic expectations about their future at a place like Utah, more so than Brock Nelson probably would, I think.
All right. Well, I am going to go with Duchene here. I've just been infatuated with the idea since it got brought up. I think I like the idea of a stopgap center here. I think that's exactly what he'd be because, if we didn't win the lotto, I would be all for Rossi in that situation. But the fact that we could be adding a super solid 2C at this draft, it makes me just feel like getting a super solid stopgap is the way to go. Let that guy bloom. And then we never have contract problems as we just constantly have this influx of ELC players coming into the team. Keeps your contending window open a little bit longer. That's the route I would like to see them go. But I think all the options we talked about today would not upset me outside of PS Suitor. Sorry, PS. Anyways, anything else before we have to go? We're going to have tons of off-season content like this throughout the summer, so make sure you're tuning in. We're going to try to do these live streams a little bit more too. Really fun to get your engagement, get your comments going, answering any questions you have. I think we're going to be talking about different topics like how to improve the team, what players we should draft. I think we're going to really hone in on kind of those 4 to 5 kids that could really be available at pick 4, kind of talk the pros and cons for each of them as well. And, that we, as much as we have a 2C problem, we kind of have a top 6 winger problem too. So I think one of those holes needs to be filled, whether that's that center or that second line winger. And I think we'll kind of explore those options maybe in the next episode or 2 or so. Either way, make sure you're tuned into Clean Hits Hockey. You can find us at cleanhitshockey.com, shop.cleanhitshockey.com for any of those shirts available. And you can find us at our Discord at discord.cleanhitshockey.com. Anything else, boys?
Utah merch drops tomorrow online.
Yep. Go get some Mammoth shirts.
Yeah.
And I got to go see if Rantanen's going to put up another 3-point night. So let's see.
And I'll be watching junior hockey as usual. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you got to do your homework for us. So, all right, everybody. We'll catch you next time. Adios.
We know we running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change.